Do you want to make a great first impression online? In this workshop, you will learn several techniques to help you look good and feel more confident when presenting online. Our workshop speaker this evening, Diane Windingland, credits Toastmasters for the communication skills and confidence that have transformed her from a former engineer who used to duck into the restroom to avoid talking with people, into an author of several books on communication, as well as a coach and speaker on communication skills through her business, Virtual Speech Coach. She is a past District 6 director and is currently the District 106 newsletter editor. Get ready to make a great first impression online with distinguished Toastmaster Diane Windingland.
Thank you, Jim. Now think back, way back to March, which probably seems like decades ago at this point. Do you remember how you felt when you realized you were going to have to pivot from speaking in person to speaking online, and your Toastmaster Club was going to have to do the same thing? I'm guessing you felt a little bit like I did. Wow, I've got to learn all this technology, video, camera, and audio, the microphone. What am I going to do? Then there's lighting, which I'm still working on, and screen sharing. Oh, that's something new. Oh, I have to think about my background. Oh, and clothing. I guess I can be business on top and casual on the bottom, right? All sorts of things. How am I going to practice now that I have to speak online? What about Zoom bombing? Here is my confession. I was hosting a Toastmaster meeting on Monday, got Zoom bombed for the first time. Quite an experience. There's so many distractions, both for me as a presenter and for the audience. People are multitasking. What about eye contact? Do I look in the camera? Now, we've all learned pretty much that. Interaction. How do I interact with my audience so that I can engage them and have a great first impression? Maybe some of those thoughts went through your mind, and maybe it was all a little overwhelming, but we've learned a lot. And today I'll be sharing with you some tips and strategies so that you can make a great first impression online, including the top 5 ways to look bad on Zoom and what to do about them, how to engage online or in person. This will be a section that you can apply whether you're speaking in front of a group in person or online. And what about taming that technology monster? That caused a lot of people a great deal of anxiety. Let's move first to the top 5 ways to look bad on Zoom. And I'm going to share about a 3.5-minute video with you. And afterwards, you will have a chance to work in a small breakout room with someone else to see if you can make your video, your presentation on Zoom look even better. So I will be sharing that video now. Just give me a moment. Okay, you should see a video. I will hit play. It's just over 3 minutes long. I'm Diane Windingland with Virtual Speech Coach, and we'll take a tour of each of these 5 ways to look bad on Zoom. The first way to look bad is to have a bad camera angle. I'll give you an example of that. Often people have it so low that you get the double chin, or you get to look up at the nose. Or bad lighting is a big problem. All too often, people don't consider where their light source is coming from. You don't want... I'm sorry to pause this, but I am not sure that people can hear this. Let me reshare that so that you definitely can hear it.
It was on rather low.
Okay, now it should be better. Your light source to come from behind you. This is a little bit better. Now I have my light source coming from the side. But even better would be if I were to close that window shade and turn on a light source that will light my face from the front. Ideally, you could sit facing a window, but that isn't always going to work, especially if you have a meeting at night. You can use. Okay, are people still not hearing it loud enough?
Diane, it's sort of come and gone.
Okay.
Yeah, I turned my volume on, and so you're really loud.
Okay, so I'll hit play again, and it's not that much longer. Use a lamp behind your computer, or you could buy something like one of these little selfie lights, which is what I'm using right now. I have a piece of cardboard taped to the back of my monitor, and then I have this just clipped onto that. Also consider your background. Does it portray the image you want to portray? And is it going to be distracting, either because maybe there's a messy bed in the background or dirty dishes, or even just things that may distract people because they're looking at them wondering what they are and maybe even making judgments about you. So try to keep it clutter-free. And I use a virtual background just because then I don't have to worry about my background. So how does this feel when I'm talking to you and I'm not actually looking at the webcam? Maybe I'm looking at your face. Maybe I'm looking at my own face. Maybe I'm looking at notes. You don't know. All you know is that I am not making eye contact with you. I may be actually looking at your face, but it doesn't feel like I make eye contact with you until I look directly into the webcam. And then you feel the eye contact. So look into the webcam when you're speaking to make eye contact. Does your clothing reflect who you want to portray? And is it something that doesn't distract or look too garish? I'm going to try on a few different shirts so you can just see how things look different. This is a basic professional type of shirt that I'm wearing now. Now I'm wearing a basic white t-shirt, which probably would be okay in person, but on video it just glares. Now I'm wearing a black t-shirt, which is probably a better choice than white, but still it's rather blah. Now I'm wearing a casual shirt with a pattern. I suggest you stay away from patterns as well as all white and all black. Look your best and don't make these top 5 mistakes. Okay. All right. I think we've all gotten a lot better when it comes to our presentations. And I got to save that. And how we look. What we're going to do now is you will have a few minutes in a breakout room of approximately 3 people where you can talk with each other and give each other some tips on what you might be able to fix right now or sometime in the near future with your camera angle, your lighting, your background, eye contact, clothing, or anything else. And if you run out of things to fix because you're already perfect, you can talk about maybe some things that you've seen other people do on Zoom that made them look bad. So Vicki, can you set up the breakout rooms for about 4 minutes for groups of approximately 3? All right, it looks like everybody has come back. I would like to hear from maybe a couple of people if they discussed something that they could actually change right during the discussion or that they'd like to change in the future. Who can share that?
I can share.
All right, Ashok.
In case I asked for suggestions, and Colbert has graciously suggested me a few things, which I believe are accurate, because I am camera-wise, I'm kind of little closer. Probably if I can shift a little bit so that way my hand gestures can be visible much better. At the same time, I can see the much better.
That's right. Now, I would say, although this presentation I'm doing today is not specific at all for contests, there are differences in how you would present. For most contestants, you probably want to stand and stand back from the camera a little bit so people can see your gestures better, and you're probably a little more dynamic as well. Other things that people, George?
Yeah, one thing that I changed, that's a suggestion from the other person in the room, was I was wearing a white shirt. And so I put on a sweater over it, and she thought it looked much better.
Yeah, you probably saw in my video, which is why I played the video, because I wasn't going to change clothes during this presentation. Wow, wearing the white was really kind of glaring. Who else has something they would like to share? Nita?
Yes, I have a background for my club meetings because it has my club poster on it. It's one of my club, well, banner. And I have a tendency to stand all the time because my screen is high. So in order to make eye contact, I have to physically move my Zoom picture of all these lovely aquarium acquaintances that I have so that it is over and near my camera so that I can talk to the camera. Or if I want to look at you, Diane, I'm still looking at you, but on the screen, but you think I'm looking at my camera, I think.
Okay.
But if I were to move it regular, I would be looking over here.
Have you seen other things that people do on Zoom that you think make them look bad? Does someone have something they've seen that they'd like to share?
The half head, like
A
this.
half head, like this. Yeah, right. I've also seen people eat. Now, I think if you're speaking, it never hurts to have a glass of water. And I do think a glass looks a lot better than having a bottle. It's also easier to elegantly drink from a glass than to have that bottle tipping up. So, and anything else that people have seen that they thought, ooh, that does not look good.
Some people will have what you might call extreme close-ups, and depending on how beautiful their nose is, that might not look real good.
Yes, I will say that sometimes a close-up can be very effective if you don't overdo it to the point of being creepy. And I do think I recall seeing Lori Zebarth do this in one of her speeches where she was making some point and she's like, you know how that is. You know, it can add a little more excitement and personality to what you present as well. So thank you all for sharing. Another thing you might want to consider is an adjustable desk. This is my husband during a Toastmasters meeting using his standing desk. And that allows him to move around a little bit more, yet still have things at the right height. So that's something to think about. You can also consider using a virtual background. Now, I don't know if I don't think you can for contests. I don't really know. But in general, if you have a green screen, like I actually have a green screen behind me. Let's see if I can show you what that looks like. So this is what I actually have behind me, is this green screen. I have given some presentations where I have uploaded a few slides. You know, it doesn't work if you've got like 50 slides, but if you just have a few slides that you want to share. So here's an example. When I'm coaching clients, I might point out that if they're going to do some impromptu speaking, they could use the prep approach. And then I would have this that I created in PowerPoint that can be used. So you can upload your slides as virtual background if you just have a few. And the way you can do that is you go to background and filters, which I think most people are aware of. You add an image, and then you can create your own in PowerPoint, the 16:9 ratio widescreen. allows you to create it in just the right size. And then I have an indication here where I got this particular background with my logo as well. I would say do not use virtual backgrounds if they make you look bizarre. Like with your, that's another way people can look bad on Zoom if they, you know, they turn and half their head goes away. So don't use virtual backgrounds unless they can look good for you. And I personally have found that although with my new computer, I don't need a green screen, it actually is much crisper with a green screen. So if you're going to do a lot of speaking, you may want to consider a green screen. How do you engage? Well, this is the part of the presentation where I talk about some tips on how you can engage, whether you're online or in person. The good news is that much is the same in person and virtually. You always want to start with why. Why do you want to do the presentation? What is your why? You should have a clear reason. And you also need to know, why does your audience even care? Why would they want to listen to you? What's in it for them? What pain point might you be addressing? Some tools of engagement, whatever the platform, would be having attention-getting openings and impactful closings, using stories to engage the emotions, and to have effective visuals. Openings and closings. Openings and closings are like the bookends of your presentation. Everything else being equal, they're often the parts of your presentation that people will remember the most, because they'll remember what you start with and what you end with. And if you have a really good story, they'll probably remember that too. Here's one way to start, I would say, a longer presentation. This would not be how you would start a contest speech, but this would be how you would start maybe a half-hour training. You might start it if you're giving a conference presentation. You want to get their attention. So the first P is pep. Do something that gets their attention. If you could go to the chat right now and put in ways that you can get people's attention, let's hear some ways. Go ahead and just type that in the chat very quickly. And I did notice from Jim Emery that they are now allowing virtual backgrounds. Vicky says, ask a question, as does Colbert. Someone said music, more music, yes. And let's see if I can scroll down. Oh, someone sings. I would never do that because then everyone would turn off the sound. A curious statistic. There are all sorts of interesting ways to get people's attention. Act out a big reaction to a situation. Tell a joke. Of course, the joke needs to be relevant to your topic. And when it comes to acting out a big situation, I would encourage you to be very careful of doing that on video when you're speaking virtually, because it can look overdone a little bit in person, but on video, it can look really overdone. So just be careful, record yourself, see what it looks like when you do it. The next P is to state a promise. State some kind of benefit that they will get. So at the beginning of this presentation, my attention getting was to ask you to think about March when everything changed. And I had a slide that came up with different words on how you might have felt. My promise is that you would learn several tips and strategies to have a great first impression. And then path. You want to preview your points because people like to know where you're going to be taking them. So you can start with the 3 Ps, pep, promise, and path. You can end with the 3 Ps in reverse. You can summarize your points, kind of a recap. Then promise. You can revisit your benefit and show them how they got that promise in your presentation. Finally, you can end with a little pep. And often that would be a call to action in many types of presentation. What's the one next step that they might take? Stories. Everybody loves stories. If people can remember your story, they will remember your message. Let me give you a little example. Well, first, let me talk about stories. Stories, they put things into an emotional context. And people, when you engage their emotions, that makes it very memorable for them. Stories, whoops, oh well, that's what happened when you're sometimes doing presentations, you get a little trigger happy. Stories are concrete. They are not an abstract concept, so people can dig in and they usually can really see what you're talking about. So here's the example. This is me at age 3. Big smile, big teeth, bad hair. Well, I did learn a few things at the age of 3, and one of them was the power of the spoken word. It occurred when my mother brought me to work one day to meet her boss and coworkers. And one look at her boss, and I was in awe. She was perhaps the ugliest woman I have ever seen. Long pointy chin, hooked nose, bushy eyebrows over beady eyes. Wow, Mom, she looks just like the Wicked Witch of the West. Complete silence until my mother turned to me and said, Diane, don't you mean like Glenda, the good witch? Hello, had my mother lost her mind? No, Glenda was pretty. Fortunately, the boss lady laughed and all was well, and I had a newfound power, the power of the spoken word. Now, I'm going to have a little pop quiz, so go ahead and unmute yourself. And if you know the answer to this, and I bet several will, just go ahead and say what the answer is. You can wait till I ask the question, though. How old was I?
3.
Yeah, that was easy. Where did my mom bring me?
To work.
Work, that's right. Who did I think the boss lady looked like?
Wicked Witch of the West.
That's right.
Wicked Witch of the West.
Whom did my mother try to get me to say the boss lady looked like?
Glenda.
The good witch.
Good witch, right. And what new power did I have?
Power of the spoken word.
That's right. Now you can go back to muting yourself. The whole point of this exercise was really to show you just how well people can remember things when you put facts or concepts in the construct of a story. If you wrap it in a story, people are so much more likely to remember things. So how do you create the story? Well, here's some storytelling basics that you can use for most stories. Here's what I call the shape of a story. And this would be a story with a happy ending, which is why the end is higher. So you have to have some context. If you don't give any context, people will wonder like, what? And if you give too much context, like every detail, you don't let people use their imagination. And they also want you to get to point B very quickly. And that is the challenge or conflict. So just give enough context to set up the challenge. Then there's usually some rising action. There's a turning point. There's some falling action, and there is a resolution where things perhaps have changed. Using my story as an example, the context was that my mother brought me when I was 3 to work to meet her boss and coworkers. The challenge or conflict occurred when I said that the boss looked like a witch. The rising action was when my mother pleaded, "Don't you mean Glenda?" The turning point was when the boss laughed. And then I very quickly went to the end and said all was well, and that I had a new power, the power of the spoken word. So use this story line for many of your stories. Now, if you're in business and you're telling case study stories or client stories, that's when you want to make the main character not you, but your client. And then you, or the service or the product, you are the guide on the side that helps your client become the hero of his or her own story. And that's why client testimonials work so well. So when you're telling a story, it's often best if you're not the hero of your own story. A business coaching example for me. Several years ago, a company hired me to help one of their technical employees mainly reduce his ums and ers because he was going to be presenting at a conference in a couple of weeks. And frankly, they were very concerned that he would embarrass the company because he said so many ums. Well, I had a couple hours with him and we had to work on some other things, but the problem, we licked in 10 minutes. And those of you, all of you who are in Toastmasters will understand this technique, even though we don't usually do it in clubs anymore. First, I had him give the opening 3 minutes of his presentation and I recorded him. Then I had him listen to the recording. In that 3 minutes, he had 30 ums, but you've never had anybody in your club that was quite that bad about the ums. And he realized just what a challenge he had. And I said, do you want to change? Do you want to reduce those ums? And he said, yes. So then I had him do the next 3 minutes, his opening again, although I told him, you're not going to like me, but every time you say, I'm going to hit this Coke can. And I had a Coke can and a pen. And sure enough, he did not like every time I hit the can for every he kind of stiffened up. But it was very effective. And then I had him take another 3 minutes and do it again without me hitting the Coke can, and he only had 3 ums. The moral of the story, or the result, was that when he gave his presentation 2 weeks later, it was a success, and he did not have excessive ums. So that's an example where it was the process that I wasn't the hero, but my process was the hero in helping him become the hero in his own story. Effective visuals. This is even more important when you are sharing PowerPoint during a Zoom meeting. How can you make them better? So there's 4 basics of effective slides. Typically 1 idea per slide, minimal text, engaging visuals, and relevant to what you're talking about, not some cartoon just to make people laugh. So go ahead and in the chat, write down what you think the #1 problem is when it comes to slides. Too much text, crowded slides, too many damn words, too busy, too wordy, keep as minimum as possible. Text of War and Peace on 1 slide with too. Ditto. Too many slides. Well, let's see, I'll just give you my opinion here. Too much information, which is basically what most of you said. Now, you probably didn't even notice that the word significance was in there, because when you have too much information on your slide, significance can get lost. What do you think the #2 problem is? Okay, go ahead and write what you think the #2 problem is in the chat. Background colors. Let's see what else people come up with. No pictures, visuals, size of text, poor design, speaker reading the PowerPoint, people reading their slides, amateurish artwork, slide doesn't match the message of the speaker, irrelevant information. You know, all of those are problems, but I had to pick something that I thought was the number 2 problem. And what I picked, well, you know what, rather than me tell you, let's experience problem number 2. This slide gives you the dozen virtual presenter basic competencies, which I will read one by one. No, I'm not going to do that. It would be blah, 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 because problem number 2, people don't listen well when they are reading. So if you have a slide with a lot of text, and you're also reading the slide or talking about something related to the slide, you know that everyone is going to read the slide. And when they're reading, they're not really paying attention to what you're saying. A little better is if that you have bullet points coming in one at a time. So something like this, where I might, even though this isn't great, I could have one bullet point at a time, talk about it, then bring in the next bullet point. That's an improvement anyway. Much better would be to use a picture. For example, with number 3, to talk about muting and unmuting yourself in a meeting. Often the best visual is you. You do not have to share slides for every presentation. Even when you are sharing slides, you don't have to share slides all the time. Just as when we came back from the breakouts, I did not immediately go back into the slide presentation. We had a little bit of discussion. And for certain stories, maybe you don't want to share slides. So I'm going to show you another alternative. I'm going to stop sharing to show you what I want to. Remember when I said you could use your virtual backgrounds if you're able to do that? So if I was telling the story about me at 3, maybe I would just have this as a virtual background. This is me at 3. And then I could switch it over. When I said the Wicked Witch of the West, I could switch it over to that and actually have it show within my virtual background as an alternative to sharing the slides as well. So I'll go back to that and reshare my slides. All right. Let's talk a little bit about that technology monster. I got to tell you, I get bit in the butt by that regularly. Whether it could be, you know, my finger got a little slap happy and I advanced too far in my slides, or I forgot to share with sound. So it can happen, but you can reduce the things that happen to you by trying out a few things. So when it comes to sharing content, as you well know, you have options when you share your screen. One of the things you can do if you are sharing a PowerPoint, for example, and I admit I hate when people, you know, they know they're going to be speaking and they know they're going to be sharing, yet when they get ready to share, it's almost like, oh, I got to open my PowerPoint, or you know, they have it set to the thumbnails so you can see their entire presentation. Go ahead and get your PowerPoint set up and in the slideshow mode well before you actually need to share it. That way you can very smoothly share your content rather than fumbling with your slides as you're presenting. Now, if you're going to share with video, and I sometimes forget this, but it's important to check the box to optimize the screen sharing for video clip, or people may not be able to hear and see it as well. Then there's advanced screen share. Have you ever tried that? There are some very interesting options. One of them is to use your slides as a background, and it can look something like this, where you show up on your slides. There are a few challenges. One is, well, one good thing is you can adjust your size and your position. You can't use animations, like you can't have bullets come in one at a time. Your video is not mirrored. So I use my video mirrored when I talk, because then if I go to the left, I actually look like I'm going to the left, but you can't do that if you're using the advanced share with your slides as the background. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I wanted to also mention, I tried demonstrating this once in a meeting, and because I had a very long slide deck, it took forever to load, and then my computer crashed. So I'm a little hesitant to do this. I don't think it'll be a problem if you have a shorter presentation, but again, definitely practice. There's also advanced screen share where you can share just a portion of your screen. You don't have to share anything that you don't want to share. You can also share content from a second camera, which has some advantages. Like if I want to show how to do something, I could set up my second camera to show people how to do something. You can also use your phone as a webcam. Maybe you have a laptop and the webcam isn't so great. Well, there is an app, and I don't know if it's both Android and iPhone. I have an iPhone called Epic Cam Pro that allows me to use my iPhone as a webcam. And so here was what my setup looked like with my phone on a tripod. And there's my cat. I forgot to close the door. A second camera can also give you some options for presenting. Like if you want to walk back to a flip chart or a whiteboard, you can do that really easily with a second camera, as well as having your main camera. There are so many additional tools available. I can't even list them all here. There's the whiteboard. In my experience, it's usually a time suck. So it's fun to play with. And if you need to show something, great. But if you want people to interact with it, you better plan for some extra time, as you would need to for annotations as well, because people don't know what to do, and that's okay as long as you allow time and allow people to get used to a particular tool. I don't know if any of you used Prezi Video with the Zoom integration. I'm very curious. If you have used Prezi Video with Zoom, write that in the chat, because I did a trial for like a week, and it is pretty cool because your slides are like right in your virtual background, but there were some challenges and I didn't really like their templates that they had. Okay. If you have organizations or groups where there are hearing impaired people who are hard of hearing, you can have closed captioning with third-party integration. I have tried that, I think with Rev and maybe one other outside third party. It works okay. There's a bit of a delay, but that is definitely an option if you have hard of hearing people in your meeting. Of course, you know, you can live stream to YouTube and Facebook. If you've been on any of the District 106 business meetings, you'll know that they live stream those meetings as well. I love the fact that you can integrate your calendar with Zoom. And I even have a scheduling tool that I use with clients that allows me to integrate my scheduling with Zoom as well. So you do not have to learn everything all at once. And many of these things are not as important as other things, but it's nice to know that they exist. A few things that you will definitely want to do is to check connectivity and practice the platform. So have you ever done a speed test? I'm actually going to do a new share just to show you a speed test. If you Google speed test, okay, that's what I've done here. I'm going to run a speed test. Now, most people have pretty good download speeds. It's the upload speed that's a problem. And I would say you probably need an upload speed of at least 6 megabytes per second. And we actually paid more so that we can have faster internet. So sometimes just Google internet speed test to find out what your download speed is. Let me go back to that. And also, if you're doing something really important and you're concerned about your video freezing, You make sure that other people aren't using up your bandwidth, like if you have a kid that's gaming or something like that. You may need to upgrade your internet plan. We did need to do that because our download speed was not fast enough. You need to know the platform. You can practice with yourself on Zoom and even record it to your computer or the cloud and watch the recording to see how you come across. And then, and this is what Toastmasters is great for, you can practice with other people so that you're comfortable using the platform. Have backup plans. What if it doesn't work? Can you, if you have an iPad or tablet, can you use that as a backup? Or if your internet goes down, can you use your phone as a backup? So have a backup plan and use a checklist. I will be sending in the chat when my presentation is over a checklist that I use with my clients. And in fact, I even use it myself to remember things like, don't forget to get a glass of water, because it's awful if you're sitting and you don't have water and you get a tickle in your throat. So things like that, which I will include in the chat a little bit later. My question to you is, how will you make your presentation a gift to your audience and make that great first impression online? How will you wield the tools of engagement that I've mentioned today, and even tame that technology monster? So before we go into questions, I would like to hear from a few people on what they had me share that you might implement in your own speaking, something that was new or something that will reinvigorate how you do something. So who would like to share about maybe something they might do differently?
I would like to share.
All right.
First thing I liked it, I never tried before, is the implementing the slides as a background.
Great. And I would say make sure that you can do a good virtual background. I don't know if I would do it if I couldn't do that well. And I can do that because of the green screen. Other comments, some benefits that you gained from this presentation tonight?
Diane?
Yes?
I would just echo one that you do, practice. It's amazing how much you will learn by just doing it, recording yourself, and going back and looking. Things that you just never realize are going on. So there's nothing better than practice to get better. That's
true. And yeah, and practice will even enable you to recover from mistakes faster. It's like, oh shoot, oh well, you know, it's easier to go on if you've practiced recovering from mistakes. Maybe one more comment. Who has a comment they'd like to share?
I do like the idea of using an image in your slides rather than words. I know for me, slides tend to be an afterthought for a lot of the presentations I do, and it's just habit to type in a bunch of things afterwards. Images seem like such a better idea.
Thank you, Eric. We have a few minutes for questions, and I would be happy to take any questions that people have on anything, really. And I can't see you, so you may just, because right now my video is spotlight, I'll go to gallery view so I can see. What questions would you have for me?
This presentation is being recorded, correct?
I believe so.
Yes, that is correct.
Will we have access to that?
We will review the video afterwards. If it's acceptable quality, yes.
Thank you very much.
Diane, would you mind talking a little bit about the topic of the why? Because that was the moment that I really kind of caught my attention and made me think more about when I'm formulating a speech. Maybe I'm not thinking so much about the why, other than I'm working on this project or that project, and I want to try and keep it interesting.
Right. Well, Vicki, usually when I speak outside of Toastmasters, it's to a specific group. For example, This fall, I did some presentations on presentation skills, virtual presentation skills, to a group that would be selling Medicare Advantage plans. And they had to transition from in-person to virtual presentations. So I had to, I actually asked the organizer why this was important. And I tried to put myself in their shoes, why would they want to hear what I have to say? And what are their pain points? And their pain points were that they really had no idea how to go from this in-person casual conversation to having to speak to someone over video. And they were very concerned that they were going to screw it up. They weren't going to know how to do the technology, and it was just very stressful. So their why was that they needed to know how to make it simple and less stressful. So when it comes to a why for your audience, sometimes you have a very diverse audience. So you have to think about, for your topic, why would this audience want to listen to you? And what might their pain points be? There are general pain points in life. A lot of people lack self-confidence, so they might want to hear you so they have more confidence. There are people, perhaps if you speak on nutrition, that are concerned about their weight or their health, and that would be their why. They want to be around for their children and their grandchildren, and you can speak directly to that. Does that answer your question, Vicki?
Yes, I really appreciate it. And just that extra facet of preparing for your presentation, make sure that you're considering the why.
Now, I saw
Thank
that
you.
there was someone raised their hand, Jin or Jim.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my question is, in a Zoom environment, how do you choose to handle questions or question sections during the presentation?
There are lots of ways to do that. One way is this way, where I am just inviting people to ask me questions. Another way is to give people some discussion points and send them to breakout rooms where they can discuss a particular issue and even ask each other questions. And then if you have time, you can bring them all back together. And honestly, if people have discussed something in a breakout room, they are much more comfortable discussing it in a larger group because they've already verbalized it with someone else in a smaller group. You can also use the polling feature, where I think most of you have probably experienced the polling feature, where you can have pre-set up some questions for your audience, and then you can see how they answer the questions. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add to asking questions in a presentation? I always learn things from other people, so I thought I'd open it up to anyone who might have some additional insights.
Diane, I have a question.
Sure.
You saw that small camera, those kind of $7.99, those kind of thing. I think that was a great idea. When if you have to go and give presentation, you can use that camera. Tell me a little bit about that.
I'm not exactly sure what you mean by the small camera. Do you mean a webcam?
Yeah, I say you are saying just $7.99 backup camera.
Oh.
You use
that is, I'm wondering if I can even do it right now. So I have Epic Cam Pro.
Yeah.
So I'm turning it on now.
Yes.
And then let me see if I can even do this. So I go to I'm going to choose Epic Cam Pro. So you can, wait, maybe it's not working. Oh, actually it is. So I'm moving my phone around now to show you how boring my office really is. But I'm using my phone as a video camera, and I could turn it around, and this will be scary. I better hold it out. Okay, let me see. Oh my God, that's kind of scary. But so this is an option, and it's an app. So if you could attach it on a tripod or something and use this as a camera. And now I'm going to get rid of it because it's really bothering me when, yeah, I don't really like the green background. Okay, so I was just showing you, it's Epocam EP, let me see, EPOC-CAM Pro. And it was $7.99, which makes it one of the most expensive apps I've ever bought because apps are so cheap or free. But that can be handy. Any other, I think I have time for maybe one more question before we move on to the rest of the meeting. Is there one more question?
I was just gonna answer your last question, if that's okay, about the some other strategies that people use when doing presentations for the question period.
Sure, Yvonne.
Is that I allow questions throughout my presentation, but I ask people to use the raise the hand feature. And that way, if I'm a host or a co-host, I get notified and I can decide when to pause and say and call on the person to ask their question.
That works very well. The participant panel, you have to, if you have a whole lot of participants, it can be a great way if someone has their hand raised to actually try. So let's just try that now, just so everyone can experience that if you haven't. If you click on the participants where it says participants and there's like 2 people, a participant panel should pop up. And then, although I don't see it because I'm a co-host, wait, maybe I do. See if you can raise your hand. If you can raise your hand. I see hands being raised. Yes, very good. And I could also ask you a question. So let me ask you a question. Are you glad 2020 is over? And see if you can use the green check mark for yes if you're glad. And then now I'm seeing that. I'm seeing lots of green check marks that they're glad that 2020 is over. We may feel that way about 2021 as well. So thank you for your attention this evening. I believe you have learned some valuable strategies that you can use to make your presentation online or even in person the best gift for your audience that you can give them. So back to you, Vicki.